No, that's not the takeaway either, guys. Yeah, good point.
Pop open a family pack of jalapeno chips today and you are fine.
All right, everybody, we are back. Welcome to the Chemist Confessions podcast. I'm Victoria.
And I'm Gloria.
And this is a human conversation on all the skincare science we talk about on the daily. And we are continuing our acne series. And today is actually a pretty meaty one. Today is our focus on benzoyl peroxide.
I will say, even though as the resin dry skin person that doesn't get a lot of acne, I am enjoying these segments because we get some pretty decent papers to talk about versus, when people want to ask about the exotic extract and the antioxidants and we have to twiddle our thumbs and go, there's nothing there. I don't know what to say.
It's always such an oxymoron that know that these meaty episodes where we talk about a lot of data, this is actually way easier for us. And it's the shorter episodes where I feel like there's no data. You might think we did less work, but it's actually took way more work to do less. It's quite annoying.
Oh, absolutely. Hours of going on the interwebs and sifting through papers and be like, you're useless to me. What did I spend an hour reading you for?
Exactly. So since today's a juicy one, we're just going to get right into it. Let's just start off with a review of what exactly is benzoyl peroxide. So to start out, benzoyl peroxide, it's actually incredibly lipophilic. It's a very lipophilic oxidizing agent, very reactive. And it's because of this that it's able to very easily penetrate the stratum corneum and reach the sebaceous gland. Kind of a similar mechanism to salicylic acid, except BPO can do it way more efficiently and reach the site where acne typically resides and is the focal point of treating breakouts. Have a little bit of a fun fact for Gloria. Did you know that in the 1900s, benzoyl peroxide was used as a bleach in the flower industry?
You know what? It makes so much sense. I mean, I'm sure it's everyone's rite of passage where you wake up and you're like, my pillow does look a little white today.
Yep. It's so representative that you were in your teen years when your bed sheets have that bleached look. So yep. And so, interestingly, it was actually first recognized to be an acne agent in 1934. That's actually how old this ingredient is. But it actually really wasn't studied and really looked at until the 1960s. But all that to say that this ingredient has been around for a very long time. And that's why there's actually a lot of data to talk about. In terms of mechanism, just want to share that it's been tied to being an antibacterial, an anti-inflammatory, a keratolytic, and even a wound healing active. Now, the antibacterial property of BPO is actually due to the formation of what it does is it forms these highly reactive oxygen species that can oxidize proteins in the bacterial cell membrane. And through that, it causes, basically is able to treat these C acnes now that we call it. So they found it to be both toxic to both bacterial organisms and yeast as well.
Ooh, so we know how it sounds. It's like, oh wow, that sounds very effective. It sounds like it will kill my cells too. So I think this is kind of an interesting topic that I think in skincare sometimes we get these questions about all sorts of ingredients. For example, we get questions about vitamin C saying it oxidizes so easily, and once it becomes an oxidized form of vitamin C, does it become a pro-oxidant? It's kind of a difficult question to answer because technically yes, but at the same time, skin is super complex. Your biology is very complex. So you kind of have to look at these studies holistically. If you look at, in theory, one chain reaction kind of mapping, of course, you can pinpoint to this part of it and say, hey, this can happen and can be damaging to the cells. But sometimes you have to look at the results as a group. And Victoria did find something that kind of looked into what this means for healthy human cells.
Yeah, I think that's such a good way of summing up. It's just like, this is the issue with academia research. Nothing is really organized when people are researching. They're all like researching through their specific lens. But there's no real good way of organizing all of that data to come to like more cohesive understanding, which is what Gloria and I actually try to do in all of these episodes. But I will share that there are a couple labs that did try to look at this. There's one study that ran a few in vitro models with involving keratinocytes to look for oxidative damage. So I'll read the results here. These results demonstrate that benzoyl peroxide induces an inflammatory reaction mediated by oxidative stress by a pathway independent of the redox-sensitive transcription factor NF-kappa B. And why they're looking at NF-kappa B is because this is a pretty common inflammatory pathway that's looked at in skincare. And this one has a lot of complex ties to ROS. And so they were thinking that if anything were to trigger a negative reaction, it would be like through this pathway. And this shows that, it in the couple studies, it looks like it is an oxidizing agent, but not via this pathway. So that's a very long-winded answer to say that none of us actually have a good understanding of how it could be a pro-oxidant. But the idea is that there's a lot more benefits to using benzoyl peroxide than the theoretical cons that might be out there.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a good way to look at all these ingredients. Really, is everything's about balance. Kind of like at the end results, where you're balancing the anti-acne benefits with the dryness you may be experiencing, and the inflammation or general like adverse effects on your skin. That's just part of it. So yeah.
So we answered the kind of like more awkward parts of BPO, but we should also focus on why it's so prevalent. One of the major benefits to BPO is that it's able to tackle antibiotic-resistant strains of acne. And this is very key, especially during a period of time. This is no longer the case, but probably even 5 to 10 years ago, everyone was just writing antibiotic prescriptions for acne.
For everything.
Yeah, for everything. And they realized, this is a really bad thing that they were doing. So we'll briefly share about a clinical that uses a 6% benzoyl peroxide wash. And in this clinical, they actually were able to find subjects that flagged for antibiotic-resistant strains of P. acne. So this is a very small study. It's only 30 subjects. But they did find that after 3 weeks of using this wash, and they only used it once daily, it was effectively able to treat this antibiotic resistance acne, which is it's a really great thing, and it kind of explains why BPO is still so prevalent in a lot of these cocktail acne regimens that are used.
And that's basically BPO in a nutshell of what it is, how it works, and why it's in so many cocktail acne treatments, prescription or not. And to sum up this segment, we're going to run through another really cool study that I don't know what it really shows us, but it's a very fun one.
Yeah, so this is just random, more for shits and giggles for everyone. There's a clinical study that was done that wanted to see if a low glycemic diet had any impact on your acne breakouts. But the thing is, this is in conjunction with BPO. So they had 84 patients. They all got benzoyl peroxide. Basically, all the subjects got a 2.5% BPO topical. But then one group had a low glycemic diet while the other one didn't. And if you're curious what kind of diet that entails, I will tell you. I will actually pull up. Yeah, here is the menu that they were able to choose from. I'll read off some of the key meals. So for breakfast, they call it, I don't know, Gloria. It says 2 small idlis.
Oh, wait, what? Idlis?
Yes, with chutney or sambar, boiled egg white, and tea or coffee.
Ugh, just boiled egg white, like they dug out the best part and then just left the white.
Let me just look up, what does idlis mean? Idli.
Idli?
South Indian savory rice cake.
Well, that sounds kind of yummy.
Yeah.
With chutney, that makes sense.
Yeah, long story short, this menu sounds very delicious, but very different in its diet. I thought it was pretty cool.
You know, something, I have to read this line from it.
Yeah.
For your 10 a.m. dessert, you're allowed... Sorry, I'm going to read this part. You're allowed 1 cup of fresh juice or orange or Mansambi. This is studied in India. Or apple without sugar with 4 or 5 almonds or 8 almonds and 3 walnuts. It's very, very specific. Here is your allotted number of almonds. It's almost like feeding monkeys. Like literally, here's 8 almonds and walnuts. Here's your portion. Stick with it.
Yeah. And so much of this is veggies and fruit. And I do think there's a statement underneath that says the stomach will be half filled always. And that sounds so sad.
Yeah, you will be kind of hungry, but we promise you it's enough.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. In terms of food to avoid, in all caps, okay, it says cornflakes, oatmeal, junk foods.
Cornflakes? I feel weirdly targeted with a cornflake statement. I mean, what's wrong with my cornflakes?
Yeah. So, all in all that to say, if you're ever curious about how some of these diet studies are done, they basically had these subjects fill out a form, probably sharing all of the foods that they eat, the typical diet that they have. And then they flag them for having either high glycemic index or not. And then they basically let the people with high glycemic index continue the way they eat, but give them a BPO product. And then this other group now has to adjust their diet to this menu that they have. All that to say, they didn't find any difference. So if you're curious on whether or not high glycemic index is a factor for you, here's the thing with dietary studies. You just really don't know. And like, you'd have to do many tests of like on the order of like 1,000 subjects to really know. Obviously, genes play genes, ethnicity, all of that factors in. So for us to say that's the first thing that you should do, no, there's really no evidence that, you know, this would be the major thing to change all that. But it can be, it's also very personal too. So if that is something that is working for you, who are we to tell you that, you know, that's not true or not? So
yeah, we will say though, even in the study, it showed that, you know, having a low glycemic value diet doesn't impact your acne recovery. Or maybe the flip side, the takeaway is you can eat ramen all you want as long as you use BPO, you're still good.
No, that's not the takeaway either, guys. Yeah, good point.
Pop open a family pack of jalapeno chips today and you are fine. But I will say the side takeaway is they did show that there is a difference in BMI and homeostasis models and other aspects of your health that is impacted by low glycemic diet. I think a long time ago we covered a paper that looked at AGEs or like and glycation end products that impact your skin quality and whatnot. That is tied with low glycemic diet. That is tied with glycemic values in your diet.
Yeah.
So not to say diet doesn't matter, but just in the realm of acne, it doesn't affect, especially in the timelines that you're looking for to see acne improvement. It's not the top thing that you need to, you know, worry too much about.
Yeah, really good point. So hopefully that gives you a nice summary of BPO, its benefits. We kind of cover a little bit of some of the mysteries of BPO as well. But we should take a break before we get into our major question, and that is just exactly how much BPO are you supposed to be using and in what format? Like topical, cleanser, nobody knows. So we'll get into that after a quick break.
Speaking of congested skin, it's only fitting that we talk about the specialist again. This is our dual AHA BHA exfoliator with 18% mandelic acid and 2% salicylic acid that you can use as an added spot treat to tackle your congested oily skin and stubborn blackhead woes.
Also, fun fact, this treatment is actually a very deep blue color that comes from our gardenia extract. We felt color was not just a fun element, but necessary for a treatment like the specialist, so you have a very clear visual when you dose and mix. So if you're curious to try this one out, just head to our website and don't forget to use CC Podcast 2024 for 15% off your order.
All right, we're back. And the question we're answering today is just how much BPO are you supposed to use? And for those of you unfamiliar, you can typically find it on the market in washes or leave-on topicals between the range of 2.5 to 10. And I think for a while there, everyone was gunning for that 10%. Brands that do BPO topicals, definitely almost all of them offer a 10% and they position it as a standard. But is that true?
Yeah, and how many times I feel like I've personally fell for the whole like rapid clear, reduces in 24 hours, eliminates breakouts in like, you know, just 10 hours or something like that. So I think a lot of those claims come from the BPO realm. So we'll dig in. All right, so for concentration, there's a study that actually goes all the way back to 1986. And in this study, they want to look at concentrations between 2.5%, 5%, and 10%. Yeah, so in this clinical study, they had 153 patients with mild to moderate acne. They basically gave them a 2.5%, 5%, 10. They basically supplied the BPO product to them, and they had them use it twice daily for 8 weeks. After the 8 weeks, they did find that the 2.5% BPO gel was actually comparable to the 5 and 10% BPO gels as well. And they found that the antibacterial, how they concluded is the antibacterial and lipid studies that they performed also showed that 2.5% BPO was also effective for use. All right, so after the 8 weeks, what they did was they compared the mean number of lesions at time points. I believe it's 2, 4, and 8, 2, 4, 6, and 8. And they found that 2.5 versus 5%, there was really no difference between the two. They looked at the mean reduction of lesions, they looked at global ratings, and they just really didn't see too much of a difference there. And then when they actually compared it to BPO, same thing in terms of efficacy. Not really much of a significant difference there. 10% group had a much higher frequency of burning, erythema, and peeling from their subjects. And that's really it. It's a very straightforward study, just kind of showcasing the concentrations. And I know this is just one study. We are going to be talking about a lot more, but this kind of just establishes everybody's baseline of where the efficacy lies and how, I guess, we got this range. But hopefully you'll start seeing that maybe we need a lot less than what we all originally thought.
I love this study because it really just opens up, just like set the expectation right off the bat to say, that's what these girls are about to get. I see where this is going and where they stand on BPO. And I also like that it's such an old paper, and it just, I don't know, I feel like as the years go on, like with acne, the claims, the formulations get more and more aggressive. But when ingredients are, I guess, in its earlier phases of making it to the market and whatnot, the initial approach is just a much more gentle one. So I find the evolution of all of this to be pretty interesting. Though nowadays there's lower concentration options available again, which is great. And
Yeah.
a side note here is also, oh my God, we're back to N equals 150 plus kind of territories. I love acne topics.
Every time Gloria gets like a healthy looking clinical, it's just like a new person. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I always feel a little awkward coming on this podcast and trying to extrapolate something useful out of like an N equals 5 clinical in air quotes.
All the time.
Right.
It's like, I think we feel the need, we have to do like jazz hands. We have to do a little dance to like say, ooh, isn't this interesting, guys?
Yeah. Especially the N equals 5 ones. I'm always like, I might as well come on this podcast and say, it works for me and my mom, so it should work for you too. It's super silly.
It's very true. I had a thought here, Gloria, is I'm pretty sure acne is the reason why people feel like skincare needs to hurt you a little bit in order to work. I just think it's born from this category. You know, like with tretinoin and BPO and with acne, we're already so violent with our acne breakouts already, like trying to purge it, trying to pop it. I just feel like there's just a lot of aggression, and it all came from this realm.
Oh, that is such a good point. I feel like it's the complete opposite of the whole like gentle, treat your skin like this sensitive snowflake, and acne people are like, what? Like scrub.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, that's the starting point. But I did want to share another, I think, really interesting clinical. This just adds a layer of thought to BPO use. Okay. So this is a study that was done in Japan, and they started out with 180 subjects, and they broke these off into 3 groups. They had one group that did a combination of 2.5% BPO with clindamycin, antibiotic. They had a combination of, the second group had a combination of 2.5% BPO and 0.1% adapalene. And the third group, they had 0.1% adapalene with clindamycin. Okay, so these are all combination therapy. They're using 2.5% BPO with 0.1% adapalene, just reminding you of some of those numbers. The interesting thing here is not even the fact that all 3 were efficacious, because there were. I'll share the chart here. You can see that they looked at both the inflammatory versus the non-inflammatory and the total number of lesions. They looked at all of those and found all of them to be effective. They did see probably a significant difference in the non-inflammatory acne, where they see that, and unfortunately, this graph is really confusing because it's all a spectrum of gray. You've got like your dark gray to your light gray, so you got to match it up. You can pause this and kind of take a look at the graphs yourself. But you'll see that group C, which is your adapalene and antibiotic group, was actually slightly less effective in comparison to the other two, which was the BPO adapalene and the BPO and clindamycin group. But all in all three generally effective.
I was going to ask, what's the time scale on this? How long did they do
good
this
point. So they did this study for 12 weeks total. Yeah, so that's actually a really good point. And I should follow up with the fact that the subjects actually use these products based on their directions. And what that means is for BPO and adapalene, they actually only used once daily. But for clindamycin, they're using it twice daily. So just something to keep in mind.
Got it. But also, even with that once daily use, which is less aggressive than many other studies, from the charts, you can still see a pretty fast effect in these cocktails.
Yeah, definitely. So these are all good signs. But I think what's really cool about this is they called this the inflammatory stage. And that is the stage where they're looking at the number of inflammatory lesions. And that, if you're over the threshold, this is the stage you're in. What they wanted to do was see what would happen when they move out of this stage, when you're actually seeing significant improvement, and it's enough improvement where they want to move this group into a phase called the maintenance phase. And in order to qualify for that, the subjects would have to have less than 5 inflammatory lesions on their entire face, okay? But on one side, they cannot have more than 3. If that makes any sense, because acne is not symmetrical.
That is very true.
But it's like very detailed. I really like this, and I think it's a great metric or just a point of reference for people who are wondering generally what kind of breakouts they're having. They found that about 100 subjects qualified for this next stage. And then after that, they had this group use either a 2.5% BPO or a 0.1% adapalene for another 12 weeks. Yeah, just to see how is that helpful in the maintenance phase. And long story short, both performed on par. They did see further reduction. They also noted that in terms of the side effects, both also performed on par. But I just thought that is like a very realistic picture of how to handle acne regimens. I think sometimes people feel like they're stuck in this like heavy dose cocktail for a really long time. But actually, there's quite a few of us that really end up more in the maintenance phase where your breakouts are a lot more sporadic. You may not be dealing with as many breakouts that are really inflamed or even dealing with any cystic acne. And I feel like this is the realm that really the OTC acne topicals like really shine, basically.
Actually, yeah, I love that. It's such a good point. And on the flip side, I also feel like sometimes people forget to continue with their regimen once they see their skin is clearing up. Like we talked about in the acne scarring episode, a lot of these OTC topicals can actually help a lot in terms of scar healing, in your scar healing journey as well. So if you want to take down your cocktail a notch, you can absolutely do that once you're in this more maintenance phase type of cycle. But at the same time, don't stop your topicals. It's good for prevention. It's good for healing. So yeah, I love that study.
Yeah, and I have one more kind of data point that I really liked is they found that on average, they have a chart, which I'll put up here, that shows like the amount of subjects that end up qualifying for the maintenance phase at what time point. And they found on average that the sweet spot is around the 7 to 8 week mark. So I think that's kind of nice to kind of gauge for those that feel like they've just been put on a heavier acne regimen. That's roughly 2 breakout cycles that you should be able to see like some significant improvement. That's like, I think that's a good time point for everybody if you're trying to figure out if your regimen is really working for you or not. So I really liked that data point as well.
Oh, this is a great study. Very, very thoughtful, very thorough.
I was like, I feel like it's very Japanese. It's super thoughtful. I think they really, in terms of level of detail, you know, the numbers they look at, they really wanted to look at a complete regimen with a lot of time. So I just think, really cool all around. And only in the acne realm.
Yeah, actually, I don't really see a lot of studies in general that changes the concentration divvy up like the clinical to see the effect of that very often. Very cool.
So all that to say, now where were we? All right, so we talked a lot about 2.5%. But we definitely want to remind everyone that BPO is not going to be, and none of these acne actives are ever going to be standalone. Acne treatments are always going to be a cocktail. And the good thing about BPO is there's a lot of clinicals of BPO tested in conjunction with other actives. So we're going to just blitz through a lot of these. I think we've already mentioned, this cocktail with, 0.1% adapalene, clindamycin. There's a clinical out there that they used a 6% BPO cleanser with a 0.1% tretinoin. And then we actually covered this last week where, was it last week? That's right, last week, where we did salicylic acid, and that was with a 5% BPO topical. And there's more. It would take up way too much time in this episode, but there's, I think, even more data around the combination of BPO and adapalene that we've covered a few times before.
Yeah, and to sum all of this up, BPO is a great active, and like Victoria mentioned, between this episode and the salicylic acid episode, something we really want to highlight is that these OTC acne ingredients you can find in any pharmacy. You probably shouldn't rely on any one of them by themselves. Most of the best studies are done in combination. And even though, especially salicylic acid, I think can be kind of terrible in this department, where a lot of products will position that one key active as the end all be all, but a lot of times you'll just see better results when using them in conjunction. And I guess to circle back to the main question we wanted to address, which is how much BPO do you really need? Honestly, anything between 2.5 to 5% topically is going to be enough. Washes, there's a little bit more wiggle room. A lot of washes we see in the clinicals are tested at 6%. We know some of the main BPO washes in the market at 10%. It won't be as aggressive as a 10% leave-on, but those are the ranges we recommend, and we don't see that much value in punching all the way up to 10%. It's just not worth going to 10% and then, let's say, foregoing your adapalene or foregoing your salicylic acid because now your skin is really angry and irritated. So yeah, that's kind of our take on BPO.
Exactly. And so with that, we're going to wrap up with a few products and talk about the BPO landscape, but let's take a break. It's the Animal Fun Fact Corner.
Yay! Today you guys are spared. It's not my turn, so no parasitic tongues.
Yes. So this is for your animal trivia fun fact to impress the man or the lady. But today I'm continuing the trend of weird animal feces.
I'm sorry. I just think your Google is like, someone send help to Victoria. She's looking at animal feces again.
Yeah, I'm just fascinated because there's just a realm of researchers out there that is looking at animal feces. And so today's animal fun fact is: did you know rhinos' feet are actually pretty tiny, like oddly tiny? They're actually, some would call them dainty. Yeah, so I think like in terms of like weight to foot ratio, it's like stumped a lot of researchers. I shouldn't say a lot, a few. There's not armies of researchers out there trying to figure this out. But anyways, that's just kind of a weird thing to know about them, because rhinos can actually weigh as much as 8,000 pounds. But what's weird is that they found that their toes, peak pressure is like really only like 75 pounds per square inch, which is like not a lot. And because of that, that's like, it's inspired certain researchers to figure out what is going on with them, how they're able to distribute weight on these like dainty little pads with like so much weight.
Wait, how big are they?
Yeah, that's a great question, Gloria. So it looks like roughly the width of a rhinoceros foot is about a foot.
So like wait, that's like human-sized feet.
Yeah.
There are definitely many basketball players that have bigger feet than that.
Exactly. So they find this perplexing. They also cannot figure out how they're able to withhold so much weight on these four feetsies. So I think the thing I wanted to share with Gloria is that there's a group of scientists out there actually studying how rhinoceros walk. And let's see, I think that the first article that came out on this was around like 2012. And then the publication on their research came out in 2019, which is so much time to spend trying to figure out rhinoceros weight distribution. I was thinking, I was like, that is a really long time. And what they did was have rhinos walk back and forth on a pressure pad with like a bunch of sensors to figure out how they're like exerting force on this sensor pad. And that's like basically how they're kind of like learning like where in the foot they like put pressure. And I'll be honest, I read the sum of the summary. It's not that interesting. but I think it's like, honestly, just, the fun fact is rhinoceros have weirdly small feet for being so large. And there's scientists out there dedicating many years of their lives to figure out how this is actually physically possible. And that's it.
It's like, I do think the image is kind of adorable. It's like the human equivalent of like finding out LeBron James wears like size 4s or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really good way of putting it. Yeah. So, and I think what's funny is there was this one quote that they had. Let me see if I can pull it up. But it was just like kind of like adorable the way they described it. Yeah. So they were saying like, they're talking about like the technical difficulties of their project. And they were saying that, so they have to have the animals like basically follow this like ball that's like attached to a pole and basically like lure it across the pad.
Come, Petsy, come on,
little rhino. And then they reward them with treats every time they like touch the nose to their ball. And then, but they were saying that the beasts actually easily get distracted from the routine. And this guy, I think the researcher, the quote is, they don't care really about science. Like that's how he describes the difficulties of the study. So I was like, wow. My goodness.
I just imagine there has to be someone that spent their years doing their PhD chasing rhinos with a little ball or trying to get rhinos to chase a ball. Yeah. What is my life? What is this?
Yeah. I mean, okay, if you're wondering why they do it, ultimately they're hoping to figure out like this is actually for veterinary medicine for larger animals. Should they need sometimes they have foot injuries or like over time as they age they have like lameness in their legs. They're trying to figure out like if they figure out how weight is distributed, they can understand like where those like injury prone areas come from. That's the goal with this.
That makes sense.
But holy cow, talk about like the most niche aspect you can get like ever.
You know what? I got it, Victoria. After we make this, after we get our crystal chalices, the next startup is gonna be Air Rhinos. It's not forget Air Jordans. It's Air Rhinos. The most supportive, superior shoes for your feces ever.
For your feces and your pet rhino's feces. So comfortable, a rhino will wear them for a long time. I like it.
I can see the PR going very poorly. So, are you calling me a rhino?
Anyway. So if
I love this.
Yeah,
this
if you're
really
interested
cute.
in funding that Kickstarter, let us know. All right. We should get back. All right. Yes, I agree. All right, let's wrap this up. So, in this final section, we're going to talk about some products. But Gloria and I feel like we should remind people about the benzene scare that happened recently with BPO.
I will say, when I saw Victoria put this in the guide, I'm like, oh man, yeah, no, you're right. We should. I don't want to, but we should.
So we're not gonna get too much into the details. But long story short, Balshore came out with a report. They basically did a bunch of accelerated testing at different temperatures, and they found that the benzene concentration was higher than is the actual FDA limit, which is 2 ppm. And ultimately, our issue before was that the tests that were run, they are not common temperatures that are used in accelerated testing. A lot of them are way higher than we would use. And then the actual data that we wanted to look at, the 37 degrees Celsius data, was not really shared. So
Yeah.
that was our main issue with that. And then ultimately, with that data that was shared previously, we felt that based on the initial concentrations of benzene in these products, we weren't worried because a lot of them did fall under that limit, the FDA limit provided. So ultimately, we just want to remind everyone that we're not particularly worried because we like that most of the products that they tested at the T0 time point, they fall under the limit. The other thing is that the reason why we aren't very alarmed by this data is because the alarming parts are actually in the higher temperatures, and that basically suggests that you'd essentially have to be baking the product in order to get those higher amounts of benzene. So that's probably the only takeaway here is you can continue using BPO. It's not a problem. It will not be harmful to you. However, just keep in mind, try not to bake them or do anything that's too drastic. Leave them in a car, bake them out in the beach or anything like that. It's just, you don't need to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's something else to keep in mind too is in the value short test, these are store bought. So they went to the drugstores, picked them up, and so while in the paper they kind of expressed concerns over storage conditions and this and that. They went to a store and bought it. So the whatever storage, transportation the products have already been through, they've already been through it. So the baseline level is not too concerning. I will say if you live in a really hot area, if you order these products online and if it sits under the sun for a little bit before you collect your package, maybe consider just going to the store, pick it up. But all in all, for products in general, just keep it cool and in a dark place and you should be fine.
And I did want to call out, there's a couple products out there that I just want to flag that they're just more commonly used. So like Galderma, Neutrogena, Differin, Panoxyl, these all at T0 were found to have very low amounts of benzene that were just not that these were all under the limit, the benzene limit. Definitely take a look at the chart yourself. There are a couple where Gloria and I are like, that starts out a little bit higher than expected.
That's a little weird.
A little strange. But those are all either, I think, prescription or just not commonly used. So there's relief there. So that's really it on the whole benzene scare there.
Cool. So let's wrap this up with some common products that we recommend. With the washes, you really have a lot of options. I think the standard here is definitely the Panoxyl 10% BPO wash. That one is classic. So I've actually used it, even though BPO does nothing for me because I don't really have acne, but I tried it before. It's okay. You get a lot of TikTok videos telling you to leave it on your face a little bit before washing off. I mean, there's some truth to that. As a rinse off, you don't have a lot of contact time with the actives, but it's a 10% level. So if you just lather it slowly and real good, that should be enough. You don't have to use it like a mask. For those of you who don't want to use a 10% wash, if that's a little high for you, CeraVe has an option with 4% BPO, and the Inky list has a 5% BPO option as well for you to choose from.
There's also plenty of topicals to choose from. La Roche-Posay has a 2.5 and a 5%. And La Roche-Posay has a 5.5%. Although I wanted to tell Gloria, that thing now costs $36. I do not know what happened. I do not remember BPO ever costing in the 30s. So I don't know. It's starting to get crazy. Like, prices are getting crazy. I don't understand.
Yeah. So I used to buy the Effaclar Duo, that's their BPO product for my friend when I traveled. That was not $36 when I used to buy it for my friend. I remember it being maybe like $22 or something like that.
I just after that whole sunscreen realm we did, and now getting into BPO, I'm just like shocked. I'm shocked by some of these price tags now. Skinflation. Yeah. So all that to say, I do want to put out there that I think where I am in my journey, I'm very much in the maintenance phase. My breakouts are sporadic. They have almost feels like no rhyme or reason. They feel stress induced, hormonal induced probably. For where I'm at, I'm probably going to look into the 2.5% topicals and maybe the 5% BPO washes. That feels like a good starting point for me. If you're wondering in terms of where you should be starting, I think with any acne topical, starting out with less first is just better. You're most likely using other actives out there. you just don't need to immediately dive into a situation where skin is under a lot of fire. Just being able to start incrementally lower, you know, that realm is just much easier to build out a more beneficial routine than trying to go for higher. So I'd highly recommend just starting with a 2.5% topical or even just a wash to start and see how skin does with that and if it's tolerating it well. But yeah, I think that's it. Was that helpful?
That was so helpful, Victoria. Thank you very much.
All right. Yeah, that's it. That's the end.
Cool. This is our BPO episode. Hopefully that was a helpful overview. Let us know if you have any questions. You can find us on our website at chemistconfessions.com. You can write to us at info@chemistconfessions.com. DM us on Instagram at chemist.confessions, where we also regularly poll you guys for your questions that shape these episodes. We'll see you guys next week.
Hey.